Welcome back to Brothers in Boots. My name is Mike.
My name is Jeff.
And today we will be talking about ordering a pair of Indonesian boots and all you need to know when it comes to placing one of these orders. This one will be in 3 parts, and it'll be a little bit different just because ordering from these guys is a little bit more nuanced than it would be to going to a website, selecting a couple things, and hitting pay now with your PayPal. So
These are the type of orders that are the most scary for people, the most apprehensive, cause people pause, because they are smaller builders and in the way that you have to place your orders.
it's a little on the sketch side. I'm gonna call for what it is. It's a little sketchy. There are a ton of Indonesian makers. I will mention a couple of them here. But regardless of that, the ordering process is very similar through all of them. And it's going to start with finding them on WhatsApp or Instagram, starting a DM with them, telling them what you want. They'll come back with a certain amount of information. God, I love Sazerac rye. That is one of my favorite cheap ryes. It's a shame.
It is. When you can find it for cheap.
Yeah.
A lot of places have marked it up too much nowadays.
Or stick it on the allocated shelf, even though it's not allocated.
I saw a post, same company, but only somewhat related. I saw a post today from a guy showing a picture at a grocery store in California of Buffalo Trace, not the bottle, the label, not the distillery, having but it was like $30 and it was on sale for 22. And the guy was like, yeah, this is fucking crazy. And I looked at it, I'm like, no, this is normal. What you're used to is crazy.
Yeah.
Too many places marking shit up just because they can, because stupid people are paying too much for cheap whiskey.
I ain't no kidding. I can't remember the last time I've seen Buffalo Trace under $22. And it's always magically on sale, even though it's not that easy to find these days. Anyway, getting back on track. So when it comes time to place an order with one of these guys, you'll hit them up with a message on Instagram or WhatsApp, and they'll ask you for some information. But essentially what you're going to do is you're going to go over your list of builds with them. You're going to go over, I'll go through the specs later. We'll do a slight mock order. Provide them all that information, pick your leather model, blah, blah, blah. Provide them sizing information, and then with the Tahura being the only one I'm aware of that doesn't, they'll ask for half of whatever the price is then to get your order started. You'll do it through PayPal, goods and services. None of them will do friends and family. I think something in Indonesia can get them in a lot of trouble. So they will do goods and services. They will mark it up to cover the PayPal goods and services fees and shipping. So your overall total order will include all of that. Once again, I don't know what the reason is, but none of these guys will even touch friends and family with a 10-foot stick. So I'm assuming something in Indonesia can get them in a lot of trouble.
There's no reason the consumer would want that anyway.
Except for
it's the business that it would save money.
Yeah. Anyway, so that's what you'll do. You'll give them half, with the exception to her. Her ask for the full thing up front. They'll tell you whatever the wait time is, and hope and pray that you get a pair of boots in the mail in a couple months. Now that being said, I do have a number of Indonesian pairs. I've got 3 of them to the side here. I think I'm around 7, right around 7, and I've never not received a pair. So I have never seen a credible story either of someone not receiving a pair, with the exception of a company that doesn't exist anymore that used to work through Isaac at Pigeon Tree Crafting. Through Santalum, he ran a number of Pigeon Tree collab models. I think he ran 7 of them in total. In the 7th pair, he had a massive amount of issue getting everyone their pairs, and did have to refund some people money out of his own pocket for that particular order. But he did run 6 successful ones before that. That's the only credible one I have seen of people not receiving the boots that they ordered. Obviously, besides, shipping going through something like China or another province where it gets held up in customs and never leaves customs for, various reasons. Short of that, for the most part, even though I would say it is a sketchier ordering process, and there definitely is some caution that should be done with this. I do think it is a fairly safe process. What I do think is a much bigger risk in this is if they don't fit, if they do not get a customization right, or some of the stuff is done wrong, there's no way for these guys to fix it. Like, literally, it would cost you $80 to $100 to ship it back to them, and they're not just going to make you another pair. Your best bet is to sell them and cut your losses, or order another pair. That's the sketchy part of this. That's probably where, things kind of suck. Which, the answer's simple. For your first pair, don't get a fancy leather like Shinki or Tochigi, or Horweens, like higher end shell cordovan or something like that. Start with one of their cheap Indonesian ones that you can just beat the fuck out of and make a pair of shit kickers, and figure sizing out on a $250 pair versus a $500 to $600 pair. But what are you getting from these guys? You're getting a mostly handmade product because machines are expensive. The two mechanical things most of these guys use are going to quite literally be a sewing machine and a sander. And even then, it's only light sanding. The majority of the trimming will be done with a knife. The rest of this will almost be completely handmade and hand-lasted boots. And this is quite simply because outsole stitchers are expensive. Lasting machines, extremely expensive. Not to mention, you have to import them into a country where the currency is an 8-to-1 ratio of the country manufacturing and selling it, which makes it super cost prohibitive for them, because a lot of these guys are only popping out 10 to 11 pairs of boots a month. These aren't big shops. A lot of these guys are 5 to 6 people, and in some of them's case, like Renav and Tahura, significantly smaller than that. They're only doing 2 to 3 pairs a month. And I think in those guys' case, they're lucky if there's 3 guys working there. But my bias included...
Labor is a big thing here.
Oh, yeah.
Labor doesn't cost anywhere near as much there. Labor costs a lot more in a lot more areas, so that's the delta between machines and handmade.
Yep, exactly. I mean, for most of these Indonesian boots, you're basically buying the leather. You're paying less than $75 for the labor. That's where the pricing comes in so much cheaper, especially for what you get. I mean, you're getting handmade, hand-lasted boots. Basically no machines used in the process short of the upper stitching. And if you really wanted your stitchers hand sewn, you can ask them, and that might be on the table. I mean, I personally wouldn't suggest it, but that could be an option. I've never asked before. I don't know why anybody would want that. I mean, even going back to the 1850s, sewing machines have been used in shoes. So I'm not... Like, I know some people in the high-end denim scene. There's a guy in Japan. He's an Italian guy that lives in Japan that does hand sew salvage denim jeans. They're like $1,200, $1,300. So there is market for something like that. I'm just not entirely sure why somebody would want it.
People sometimes take handmade a little bit too far.
Correct. When we talk handmade in this podcast specifically, we're really referring to essentially hand-lasted / welted, more so than anything else. Like, a machine didn't do the hardest part, which is the lasting and welting. So, but that's what you're getting. A lot of these guys, they do hand welt, they do Norwegian welt, they do stitch down, which they'll call Weltschone. They do like what's called stair welt, which I have an example of I could show here in a minute. And everything kind of in between. Like, you can kind of mix and match the methods a little bit too, which is kind of an extra thing, because unlike going with a Pacific Northwest maker that's going to be using almost exclusively an outsole stitcher, you're limited to basically just stitch down and Norwegian roll welt. These guys can do quite a bit more. The flip side of that is it is kind of hard to know what materials you're getting in your boots. So this right here is a pair of Renavs in Shrunken Shinki Red Brown. It is in a stair, or what's known as a double welt. But I now, in asking them, I'm 90% sure that this is a leather heel counter cover and a leather structured toe, by the way it feels and moves, and talking to Ray, because like it does move a lot. Like, you couldn't move plastic this much. Like, there is way too much flexibility for it to be plastic. But what I don't know is, like, what quality of cork is in here. If they use a leather filler, is there other synthetics hidden in here? Like, feeling my hand on it, I do think that the footbed does under the leather footbed maybe have a thin, like, ortholite foam under it, is kind of what it feels like. It does have some squish to it, more than I would expect. I'm not going to pull it out to figure it out, just in case it is a foam under there. I don't want to have to scrape all of it out. But there does, at least to my hands, feel like there might be a synthetic under there. Or a really, really soft leather. Huh?
That would be disappointing and surprising.
Well, it is a leather footbed. Like I can feel the leather on top, and I guarantee it's a leather footbed under, because this stairwell is hand welted and needs a holdfast channel to even do. It's probably a comfort thing if I had to guess, but it's either a really soft, like, goat leather, like a split cut goat leather, or it's a synthetic. Because it doesn't squish like a Spinco. It's not that squishy, but it definitely compresses under my fingertips, which tells me it's got to be an extremely soft leather or a very thin synthetic. But that is one thing that you are going to get with these Indonesian brands, is the one I've seen cut apart, which I think Rose Anvil did, and it was a pair of Professor Barnett's. It did have foam under the sock liner. So you are going to get a little bit of that. So, there are going to be some things that aren't quite as... I mean, I'm sure if you asked, they would tell you. I don't want to say that they're not as transparent, but they're definitely catering to a more comfort-focused luxury market. Definitely not a workwear market. I don't see any reason why you couldn't work in some of these Indonesian boots. I haven't to know if you, like, I personally haven't worked in them. All my Indonesian stuff I've ordered in fairly high-end leather, so it's not something I'd necessarily want to work in. But I mean, you could. I just don't know if they're built up to the same.
I don't see why you'd want to. I mean, these are very detailed boots, very detailed specialty leathers, detailed stitching, little special things here and there. And that's not what you're looking for in a work boot. In a work boot, you want heavy duty stitches, thick stitches, thick leather, leather that's going to put up with the abuse and water situations. You're not worried about little details and trying to get more threads per square inch.
Yep.
So these certainly aren't the ones that you'd want to order for your work boots.
Yep. Like I said, this is a stitch down. So this is a stitch down boot, just like a pair of Franks. They call it belt shown, but if you look at that stitches per inch on it, like, obviously that's done by hand, but that is way denser than any of the standard work boot companies. Like, this is probably getting at least up to 9 stitches per inch, maybe even 10, which the average pair of, like, Franks or Nicks or Whites is going to be like maybe 3. So definitely 100% the case on that. And I mean, just overall, like I said, they do put an emphasis on nice, tight, stitch lines that don't have deviation, stitch lines that are, symmetrical, right? Which you come with a cost if you were to do as a, Pacific Northwest work boot company. The cost that probably is going to inflate your price more than it needs to, because straight stitches don't make a work boot more durable. I mean, as long as it hit the leather. Obviously, missing the leather with the stitcher is a different story, but I shouldn't say I don't think the companies would send those out, because I actually have an example of one of the companies sending out ones that were that bad. But generally speaking, they pass QA. They won't send out something that the stitchers just straight up missed, usually.
These are sometimes compared by people by price, comparing these boots to the PNWs in America. And it's an improper comparison to compare them. Just because the price is the same is not a reason to compare them. They should be compared to higher end boots. They should be compared to his name?
White Cloud Godo. His name's Godo.
Yeah, White Cloud and guys like Creosote and Benzene and much higher, John Lofgren, higher priced boots.
Yes. Yeah, a lot of similar features between those two. I mentioned earlier you can
Viberg as well, I guess.
That is true. Supposedly Viberg's work line's coming back. I've seen pictures. I haven't seen any for sale yet, but They might be getting mixed. So this is another example of what I mean. So this is a Norwegian welt mixed with a stair welt. This is kind of something you can do where they can like double up on welting options. This is the first time he's ever done it. This is a pair of Tahuras. And I asked him if he could do it. And he's like, I've never done it before, but I'll give it a shot. And he was able to pull it off with no issues. Does this functionally do anything? Cool. No, but it looks fucking cool. it does get cool. From above. It gives a little bit of a chonk look, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. So, now when you order a pair of these, obviously you got to give them measures in centimeters, not in inches. So you'll tell them a model, you'll give them your usual. They'll ask for one unique one that a lot of people don't, and that is after you do your foot tracing. So obviously you can't send it to them; they can't print it out. The scaling's all fucked up. So they just ask for the measurements. But when you trace your foot out, they'll have you measure heel to toe, so you'll get an actual foot length in terms of flat length, kind of similar like you would with the Brannock. They'll ask you for your Brannock. They'll ask for ball, waist, instep, heel, ankle, just like everybody else. Right and left of both. Waist might be the only exception that you don't normally see. I know Buck asks for waist, but I don't think anybody else asks for waist. That's between the ball and the instep. He might be the only one. But anyway, if they ask for it, essentially it's just to help you with toe volume. But from there, they'll ask you, they'll call it upper, but they ask you what your leather is, which is going to be your upper. Your eyelet, whether you want silver, antique, brass. You can give them like how many eyelets and speed hooks you want, all eyelets, mostly speed hooks, so on and so forth. I tend to ask them to try to match them to my Pacific Northwest boots, where they leave an eyelet open at the top. I don't have an example of that here. I have an all eyelet example, and I have a 7-inch speed hook example. But I usually ask them to try to leave an... Oh, I do have one right here. Hold on. I lied. Where I'll ask them to try to do it like Pacific Northwest, where they do the 4 eyelets and then leave one at the top. So, but that's all completely up for debate. You don't have to do any of those. This is one of the nice things is you can choose these patterns. They'll ask you about your lining. They usually do a Brazilian lambskin lining. Then they'll ask you about your construction. Which is what I showed you there. I showed a Weltschone, I showed what's called a double welt or a stair welt, and then I showed a Norwegian welt that's comboed with it. Hand welting is an option. You can also just do pure Norwegian welt. Every now and then they'll have some other ones too. You could do 360. Tahura's done some 360s. Actually, he has done a 360 Norwegian double welt combo. It just kind of looks like a platform shoe. So there are a lot of options there. You could talk to them about that. Most of the time, they use a Brazilian vegetable tan leather midsole. It looks nice. This is also a Brazilian veg tan. It looks nice. It looks similar to Pacific Northwest. It is definitely softer than the standard ones that the Pacific Northwest guys use. It's definitely softer. I do notice this pair is not, but on one of my other benzene pairs, I am getting a little bit more leather separation in the woodsman heel. This is a Cuban, obviously, or a Dogger. So I do notice that the Brazilian veg tan does not seem to glue together quite as well. Might also be the quality of glue that they're using in Indonesia as well. That's always a possibility. And then after you choose your construction, you'll also choose how much of a midsole you want. Now, the Indonesians use the word midsole very liberally. This one is what would be called a single midsole. But looking at it, you're like, Mike, that is clearly a double midsole. You are correct. Indonesians do not count this layer right here that touches the welt as a midsole. So the one midsole is actually the second layer. If you ask for a double midsole, you'll get something like this that looks like an actual triple midsole, the thickness of a triple midsole. Now the double welt is part of what causes that, but you'll get something closer to that. This is the same thing. This is technically considered a single midsole. So they have a loose interpretation of the word midsole. So don't be shocked if you ask for a single midsole and end up with a double. They treat the word midsole quite a bit differently. And every one of my pairs, if you see, are like that. They're all technically a double midsole. Which is fine because the thickness they use just makes it the same thickness as a PNWU boot. So, and the leather's a little softer.
Thinner and softer.
Yep. And then the next thing they'll ask you is outsole. They mostly use Dr. Souls. They want to have more Vibram, but Vibram's very expensive for them to import. Dr. Souls is right there in Taiwan. Personally, I would tell you to go with Dr. Souls because I prefer it more anyway.
Ditto.
From there, they'll ask you what color you want your welt threads and your welt color itself. So like these are all natural with white thread, but you can do a number of colors with a number of different thread options in terms of the actual stitch itself. The only one I have that's not is he did golden Norwegian stitching and golden outsole stitching for this pair. So that's actually all gold. None of that's white. So there are options. This pair of Tahuras here that's also a double welt. This one actually has the white stitches. As you can see, Tahura does a extremely dense outsole stitch, especially compared to benzene. Now, I don't have any hand welted on benzene. There's this chance they're hand welting. That might just be the density for their welt shown or stitch down. They might do even denser for hand welted, or actually I don't know if they do a double welt. I don't think I've seen a double welt from benzene, but I'm sure they could do it if you asked for it. So you'll get the welt color, which is the top, and then they'll also ask you separately for your edge color. So like in this boot's case, this is natural welt from the top, natural edge, and white welt stitch. But all three of those are separate. You could do a brown up top if you wanted to. You could do a red, a green. You just got to tell them. So when they ask for welt, it's what you see from above. Edge is what they do to the side, and then the welt stitch is the actual stitching. So all of that's completely customizable. Then obviously the last things they'll ask is toe box, structured, unstructured, and then what kind of heels you want. Most of them have block, which they'll call standard, woodsman, and Cuban. There might be other options. I don't know, but those are pretty standard. Most people don't have many more than that anyway. And that covers what all the North American makers pretty much have. So there might be like a crazy option that I'm not aware of the name of. They might be able to do. They might be able to do like a Packer style or something, but for the most part, it's pretty standard. And then you'll list that information in the thing. The guys will actually take a screenshot of it and print it out on a piece of paper, and that's what'll travel with your boots, is like your actual screenshotted settings and any notes they've made with talking to you on it. I have a picture somewhere of my boots sitting next to my order listing from Tahura. I would love to show that if I could find it, but I don't really want to dig for it on my phone right now and have a gap of me looking for it. But I do have a picture of my boots sitting there done, and our conversation printed out of like the settings and everything going with them. So that's like how they do their ticketing system, and now the other guys might not, but that's how Tahura does it, which I thought was pretty cool. I imagine Renav is the same because I'm pretty sure they work in the same building. Or at least they use the same filming studio for taking pictures, because I've seen this tripod thing they use to take, because you get previews of your boots as they're making, which is pretty cool. And this tripod with a ton of these like fabrics wrapped around it, I've seen in both of their pictures. And they're both in a different, I think they're in Jakarta, which is different from Badung, or maybe most of the guys are in Jakarta and they're in Badung. I can't remember, it's one of the two. I think Badung's the capital and Jakarta is like maybe the country capital, where like Badung is like a territory capital. But yeah, now these guys don't necessarily always have the greatest English. Some of them, like Avi from Bristleback, which used to be Benzene, and Ray from Renav, have very good English and are quite articulate. Abe from Tahura, his English isn't quite as good, and he'll use pictures a lot and emojis to help kind of get his point across. But don't expect perfect English. English is not their first language. Overwhelming them with details will just make it take longer and have lots of questions being asked. But generally speaking, they're quite good. They do know what they're doing. Most of these guys have been working for brands that build boots for other parts of the world most of their lives. Surprisingly, a lot of these guys are 4th and 5th generation Dutch trained. The Dutch shoe industry was there for a number of years, from like the 1860s. Thus the word Veldschoen, which is actually Dutch for field shoe. So these guys are quite good. Most of them have been trained well. They usually do a really good job, and they do care about their work quite a bit. They care that the customers are happy. So now, once again, what are you getting out of this? Because I mentioned most of this cost is leather, right? Keep in mind, while they're only making $75 to $100 on a pair of boots, the currency conversion for them is 8 to 1. So they're getting 800 of their local currency to our $100, which is already a big boon. On top of it, I don't think the cost of living in Indonesia is anywhere near as high as, like, for, say, Japan in that area, right? If you notice, Japanese-made boots run similar prices to high-end American-made boots. And that should kind of give a comparison. So that's really what you're getting out of it. But, like I said, these guys, it's hard to compare them to American makers like PNWU. Jeff made a great point about that, especially in the price range, but also when it comes to passion. Like, these guys are much closer to your single boot builders or small boot shop builders of a couple guys building boots. Not necessarily a company that's, working a more factory, process-driven system, right? Like, I'm not going to say that there isn't at least 5 guys at Frank's that could work all the stations, because I guarantee you there is. But they're not doing it on a daily basis, right? That is something different you're getting out of this. It's someone that... passionate's not the right word, but they're more passionate about the entire process and the art of boot building versus, someone that it's a job. I mean, I guarantee you, if you were to walk into, like, Nick's tomorrow, right, and interview all the employees working in the factory portion, you would probably, for every 2 guys who cared about boots and had a passion for boots and could talk about a ton of different details, you would meet 4 that are just wearing a pair of tennis shoes that are just there to be paid. And I don't think any of the PNWs are different from that aspect. Like, you're going to get different levels of passion between them, maker to maker. Especially some of the smaller shops versus the bigger shops, obviously. Obviously, the bigger the shop is, the much more likely that's going to be the case. Especially, given the size of the factories of, like, Nick's and White's, obviously they're significantly bigger than the other 2 Spokane builders in terms of, like, square footage, machines, number of workers, so on and so forth. But you're getting something else from this. I would also lean towards Indonesian makers being a little bit more geared towards boot enthusiasts and a little less geared towards, like, mass-producing boots. While some of them do some ready-to-wear runs, they're either, if you're not handing them a picture of what to essentially try to copy and model off of, they're expecting you to be able to answer all these questions, and not in drop-down format.
These guys are start to finish guys. They're seeing the whole process instead of just seeing a piece that they're repeating day after day after day. And these guys worked for larger places previously where they probably were handling different pieces of the boot instead of the whole thing. And now they get to slow down and take a bigger piece of the pie and get more enjoyment out of making a boot start to finish. And because they love it. Like Mike said, I mean, they really love what they're doing.
Yep. And it shows. But that being said, this is geared to boot enthusiasts. It really is. I mean, some of the stuff we've mentioned, for a lot of the guys, especially like they're into, like, PNW strictly for work, they don't give a shit about any of the stuff we just listed. That is the absolute least of their concerns. So that's going to be, more something is if you, the viewer, wants what's available through that. It also depends on how much you lean towards American made, right? I mean, there are, people that are just as good as the Indonesian makers and better in America making shoes. You're just going to spend $2,000 a pair on them. That's the difference. Instead of $500, $500-$600. That's really the difference.
They're out there, and we'll probably do some videos on. I would say definitely do some videos on some of these smaller ones in America that are, I guess, kind of more in the same vein as tonight's conversation. But yeah, I mean, they've got big wait times and big money.
Yeah.
Because labor costs a lot more here.
Oh, yeah. And to be fair, these, someone like, Gabbard, makes 4, maybe 5 pairs in a month. These Indonesian guys are about the same. They're making, between 4 and maybe 9 pairs in a month, depending on like labor or leather availability and the other different factors going on. So you're seeing very similar terms of output and what they can and can't do. Every now and then they'll run some ready-to-wear lines. Like I know Renav, who's a much smaller shop. A lot of times it's just Ray. He has done some ready-to-wear runs. But when he does those ready-to-wear runs, his Instagram presence drops off. He doesn't post anything. He's 5 or 6 days to getting back on messages. So like those ready-to-wear runs really challenge him and slow his process down a lot. So you just don't see it as much, and it shows. And once again, this is boot enthusiast gear. You don't just go buy a pair of creosotes unless you think boots are fucking awesome and you love the entire process start to finish. I mean, you're spending between $1,875 and $2,300 on a pair of creosotes, but you're getting a fucking one of a kind, hand dyed, hand treated boot by one dude. And that's the kind of stuff you're seeing here. Oh, I didn't mention that earlier. These guys do overdyes. If you want overdyes or patinas, these guys do this kind of stuff too. That is something you can get.
Yep. I mean, I can't think of anything they wouldn't be willing to do, even if they've never done it before.
Yep.
I mean, like Mike showed you with that one pair that with the step. Well, he told you already. The guy had never done it before, and he said, "Sure, what the hell."
Yep.
So one thing that I've seen a few places, I think it's mostly some German builders, that the welt, like they'll weave in and out some different color threads to go with the actual welts that are going through.
Yep.
And
get this focus on it.
It'll have a really, really cool look as a result. And that's a little touch that really isn't the most difficult touch when you're doing it by hand, but it has a very cool effect after the fact.
Having a hard time getting the chain to show up. It doesn't want to focus on it. So it's a chain welt is what he's talking about, and this pair has the chain. There you go, you can see it right there. So what it is those are 3 strings. Only the internal strings are actually passing inside the welt. The other 2 are just being weaved back and forth and held down by the internal of the chain. And like what he's talking about is Tahura will do these in multiple colors if you want. Like he does this green and gold a lot. He's done 3 color ones. It's something you can request. He can do multiple welt colors. And it's called a chain stitch.
Well,
and
red color.
Yep.
Colors.
Yeah, and it's called a chain stitch, and it looks like a chain link fence. And it Cordwainers do it a lot, which is a German shoemaker.
If you had a heel and that you wanted that was feasible, that had a certain characteristic, and you could provide them a picture with it, or you're really good at drawing and could draw them a picture of it, I don't see any reason why they wouldn't attack it. I mean, they might say, well, I've never tried it before, but we'll see how we go. One of them we didn't mention that I've never seen come out of Indonesia is a blogger heel, which, well, yeah, I can have an example of a blogger heel. It's a block, but it's also a logger. So instead of going straight down here, you're going inward, or you come back out. And I've never seen an Indonesian do that, but I don't see any reason why you couldn't show them a picture of it, and they'd say, sure, yeah, we'll do that.
I mean, they'd probably end up calling it like a light woodsman or something like that. Or they would know it as because that blogger has another name. It's called a dress woodsman, which is a spoon beveled edge. It looks like a spoon's been set up against the side of the heel as a template to do it. Gabbard does it on a couple models. But I have no doubt they could do it. Actually, they probably have done it if I dug deep enough, because Ray recently did a 1940s recreation of a true spade sole with the correct spade sole heel and the spade sole last. So he actually got a spade sole last made. So he does a true spade sole, which only guys like Betos will kind of recreate for you. Most people don't do a spade sole anymore. That's a 40s, 50s thing in dress shoes. But he created a triple classic monk boot that's basically an old Sears catalog, where he took pictures from a Sears catalog and recreated it. So yeah, if you can get him a picture, they could do it. I mean, Professor Barnett's is known for sewing flames, like hot rod style flames, as toe caps. Almost all of his boots with a toe cap have it sewn in. So like, you know, they'll. I know Franks won't do that for you. I mean, maybe if you talk to him real nice, you could figure something kind of out. If you could get them a leather stamp or something that they could click out with it to try. But like they can sew in patches and some kind of obscure colors and layers if you send them the stuff for it. Like you got to give them an idea.
Never
of what
seen
to
a
do.
flame toe cap.
Yeah, here, let me see if I can pull a picture up real quick.
I was talking to him about a wingtip shaped leather toe cap, and they said they'd be willing to do it. I don't think they've actually done it yet, or maybe they're in the middle of doing one now.
Yeah, they might be.
So they will do different shapes of leather. They put a star on the side of one.
They have the bat.
They did a star on the front of the toe cap on one for knob, where the leather toe cap itself, if it was laying flat before it was put on the boot, they cut out the shape of a star, literally cut completely out of the toe cap so you could see through. And then when they laid it down into place and stitched it down, what you saw come through was the actual vamp that created a cool look.
Yeah, it had a negative star in it. So like the way it would sit over the top of it, it actually had a void in the toe cap, which created the star, and they did stitching around the outside edge of it. If you open the link that I just sent you, Jeff, I'm going to pull it up on screen as well. This is what I was talking about. This is a Professor Barnett's where they've done a lace-to-toe with a flaming toe cap and a flaming heel counter. And this is kind of something Professor Barnett's is known for. He's done this a number of times, and he's done this on regular toed boots too. Like where it's just a toe cap with that flame on it. It's pretty neat setup. I'm sure the other guys would do it too, but he's kind of known for this flame toe cap. And it's something, I mean, if you ask them, Franks might do it. I don't know. It's definitely nothing I've never seen him do before, but I don't know what the extra like labor intensive on doing that is either. Like I said, I'm pretty sure they would need maybe a clicker pattern or at least something that could be put on the leather to hand cut it out, right? So it'd have to be sized correctly into the quick scale.
Or maybe instead of just looks, if you're going for something special for function, there's a guy who's actually watched our videos and commented in a few of them who rides motorcycles. I think his daughter rides with him. And he was asking about thickness of leather and riding and stuff like that. And I was like, if you want to come up with a patch, whether it's got a cool shape to it or whether it's just a circular shape that would go in the ankle area to add an extra layer of leather protection to your ankle in case you fell. I don't see any reason why Franks wouldn't be willing to do something like that. And going back to tonight's discussion, I don't see any reason why any of these Indonesian builders wouldn't be willing to do something like that.
Oh yeah,
well,
they definitely would, and especially if it's a fairly like easy one, because Franks would just sew that on the side before they stitched the two, the backstay stitch together. I mean, that'd be quick and that'd be very, very easy and low labor one to do. Just a little extra skiving, basically. So, but from there, I mean, like I said, the world's kind of your oyster on this. Like I said, I am always going to lead towards Tahura and Renav. Both Ray and Abe have treated me extremely well. They've done some super interesting stuff from, like I said, the new welt style that no one's really ever seen before. He's actually doing another pair for me in that. It's going to be in the Chloe Feng horse rump. But they've also, sourced me some pretty rare leathers. Like I said, I'm wearing my Renav tonight, actually. This is my bourbon bourbon Horween shell cordovan in a traditional monkey boot with a lineman's patch. He's making me a pair of these in Horween intense blue shell as well. Same style with the double welt and everything. Oh, another thing we didn't mention. Even though their models have specific lasts to them, they will let you use different lasts with different patterns. You just got to tell them. It's not common for them. So like this is a Dalium and the Dalium last, and I do like it, but it is a flatter last. It's a very balanced last though. This is definitely more balanced than the H&W, but it is still very H&W like, right? The Dalium I'm getting made in the red Chloe Fang horse rump is actually going to be on the Benjamina last with this pattern, which will be unique. He has a couple models he's done that on. It's not common, but it is something you can do, and most of these makers will. Renav is much more apt at kind of using whatever last you want. This is his split-toe Norwegian tanker. This is usually done in what's called an A6 model. This is in the A7 last, which is also what I'm wearing in this monkey boot. This one's a little flatter, so it's kind of H&W-esque, but it's quite balanced. The one I'm wearing, he's actually built in a little bit of arch support and raised the heel 2 lifts. And the other pair will be the same too. So, you know, they can do single piece backstays, which, you know, shouldn't be shocking to anybody at this point, because I think almost everybody at this point does a single piece backstay except for maybe Whites. No, they have a couple models that have a single piece backstay.
Whites has some single.
Yeah, in their MP line. So I think pretty much everyone.
Nixon, Franks, all three of those have done it, and I've seen it out of Wesco as well.
I mean, JK might not do it, but I'm sure they would. If you requested it, just hopefully you get.
There's a very long list of things that they won't do, which is just fine.
Yeah, that's okay. You probably end up with 2 left boots anyway.
Shouldn't be doing business with them anyway, so it doesn't matter what they do.
Yep. But so besides Tahir and Renav, you have Bristleback, which used to be Benzene. This is, as you can see, it says Benzene on the bottom, but the new ones are Bristleback. They changed their name. Don't know why. Probably something in Indonesia, not sure. I would be a little weary of these guys. They seem to be all over the board sizing. More people seem to have sizing problems with them than anybody else. If you get your size right, you know what your size is, fantastic. This is in their praying last, which was one of their older lasts from their original, which is kind of got a Western style that a lot of people don't like. Their new engineer is made in what's called a Capic last. I do have one. The fit on it is total shit. Like, this is a perfect fit. Made to measure perfect fit. When they translated it to their Capic last, it is not a perfect fit. It is like a size and a half too long and narrow in spots and too big in spots. I've got a big, thick, like 8-ounce insole in to basically make it work, and just let the shinky break my foot in to make it work.
You mentioned 2 counter covers. Do you have an internal? They would do an internal as well.
Yes, this one actually is an internal counter cover. This
I didn't even notice.
Yep. You see the stitching there, but it is an internal counter cover with the back stay piece. This is a very I think the way the Puritan stitch is done on this, because this is a Puritan stitch, if you see it is 3 stitch with the white one. It's a very Red Wing reminiscent model, except he's taken more of a dress look of it. This is very like White Stevens. Also, Creosote does a lot of styles like this with an internal and external counter cover. It's just a very traditional 1930s, 1940s way of shoemaking. So besides, sorry, I'm just looking at my boots here. So like I said, Bristleback's one that, you know, just your mileage may vary. I'm not the only, like, Dale's had to sell a pair that need to be resized. Jimmy from Trinity Handmade has had to sell a pair that's been resized. The Denim Dentist has had to sell a pair that need to be resized. It is, especially, and a lot of them are dealing with that Capic / Krang last. So it is a thing. It seems to be a little bit more so with them than some of the others.
So we've mentioned Tahara got pronounced a few times, Renav a few times, the Bristleback, which he was just saying they changed their name, and we mentioned Professor Barnett's.
Yep.
Slightly, at least.
Yep. Professor Barnett's is known for kind of like his wild stitching. He has a lot of interesting patterns. He doesn't do anything wrong. I just don't particularly own any. His other choices haven't been what I've looked for. When I first started getting into Indonesian brands, it was quite simply to get Shinky, which is why I've been showing you 3 Shinky examples. And it's not the only Shinky examples I have. You did see one Merriam. This is the Merriam reversed waxed horse rump. This is in their reverse setup, which means the reverse side is finished, not the skin side, and it's the reversed wax. This is very cool setup. I really, really wish Franks would like look at ordering a couple of the colors in this in the reverse finish and the waxed finish, and maybe like reversed wax like this, maybe some reverse and maybe some just wax with the smooth side wax.
I'm hoping for that as well.
The
the Prof Barnett's or Professor Barnett's, I don't know, but that one in the Facebook groups at least, and I think in the Reddit groups, is probably one of the more popular ones. It's one of them that's gotten a big name that a lot of people have, I guess, become more comfortable with taking a chance on.
Yep.
See lots of those around. They're not known for having any kind of arch, so it's outside of my interest zone.
Yeah, I haven't seen a single last of theirs that has an arch. You might ask, maybe they've got one. I haven't seen a pair they've posted with it. One of the reasons I've kind of stayed away from them. Underhood is one that everyone's probably heard of. The guy's name is Risky. He is a single man start to finish shop. I personally will not own anything from him. The sizing seems to be all over the map with his stuff. And because he is so popular for what you were getting, he's one of the much more expensive Indonesians. His stuff will be closer to $1,000. But it is one man, handmade, start to finish. And because of his popularity, he does boot lotteries, which I think is fucking stupid personally. What it is when he has a leather available, he'll sell 4, 6, 8 pairs. Everyone who comments on that post that wants it, and there'll be 75 plus comments, and he will lottery off the 5 people who can make whatever model they want in that leather. So not only are you waiting for a leather you want, you've got to win the lottery when it happens. And I see a lot of underhoods for sale. Now, I think a lot of that's because people win the lottery and then they hastily put all their measurements and everything together, and then it never quite works out. Whatever it is, doesn't matter. Risky makes phenomenal boots. The sizing definitely seems to be a problem with a lot of people because there's a ton of like my underhoods don't fit for sale. But just the ordering process alone isn't like I don't do boot lotteries. I just like there's a lot of like high-end gun and axe makers in the United States that do these stupid fucking lotteries. No. Like, I don't care if the waiting list is 5 years, put me on the fucking list. I'm not doing this. I gotta be on every Monday at 7 p.m. to order your fucking Lee and Hoffman blacksmith axe or buy some ridiculous number of lottery tickets. I don't give a fuck if your waiting list is 3 years. That shit's stupid. I don't play those games. I don't play these like, I'll just set up a bot to do it and blah, blah, blah. No. Like, I'm technical. I'm actually an IT professional. And I can very easily do it. Setting up a bot to buy this kind of shit online is not hard. I do not, conscribe to the spirit of that. If I need to have a bot to buy your PlayStation 5 or your dumb fucking axe or your, fucking pair of underhood boots, I won't be a consumer of it. It's as simple as that. If you can't manage waiting lists and customers' expectations, I don't want to do business. I talk to these guys once my boots are done. Like, I still talk to Ray and Abe separately in Instagram chats. Like, not about orders I have going through or when I had no orders going through. Like, I meet with the makers. I've gone down to Flora's shop and gone through multiple times. I have another pair of hers coming up here soon. I've made trips when my pair was done just to make a trip down to the shop. Like, I keep in contact and keep up with my makers. Shockingly enough, I actually trade pictures quite a bit with Gabbard. But I'm not interested in like odd lotteried out transactions because everything is so big. Like I'm interested in makers that want relationships with their clients. Like, it's a very old world Cordwainer bespoke style where the bespoke maker loses money on the first pair, but you keep coming back for more pairs after that, and you have a bit of a loyalty to that maker. You can talk to that maker. That maker knows how you as a boot wearer wants to use their boots. They know after you've brought the first pair into repaired, all your subsequent orders, they need to reinforce specific areas, pay attention to specific areas. That's the kind of interaction I am interested in. When I tell, Ray Furmanov something that didn't quite work well with a pair that I have, he fixes it for the next pair, and he'll fix it for the remaining pairs, and has done so far. That's the relationship I'm interested in, not some kind of stupid fucking boot lottery. Which, once again, Risky makes great work. If he just switched to a traditional waiting list, I'd buy a pair. But as long as he's got the lottery, it's of no interest to me. But he is considered the best Indonesian maker, which, for what you get from his craftsmanship, it's not wrong. The next two brands are a little bit older, and one of them is considered the original. So Sagara is considered like the original Indonesian brand. They've been around well over 10 years. I think even Tahura is like since 2014, but I think Sagara is like 2006 or 2007. They're quite a bit older. And they are like the original Indonesian brand. They have a website, so they actually have a more traditional website that you can order from. You don't just have to do Instagram unless you're a weird width. Some of the weird widths you do have to get in contact with them via Instagram or WhatsApp first to talk about before you do. If you want anything that's a little bit more custom and not what's on your website, you also have to contact them on Instagram or WhatsApp as well. In that same vein, another group that the Cord Master is what they're known for. Cigar. It's like a lace-to-toe hiking style boot that kind of reminds me of a Danner Mountain Light, except you can get it in fucking orange shell cordovan. So that's kind of the difference. But it reminds me a lot of the whole cut Danner Mountain Light.
Whole cuts are pretty cool. Don't see much of them. Don't see much of them in anything other than hiking, but it seems like it'd be a pretty cool thing to try to do as a more traditional boot style, but I haven't figured out how to make it play out yet.
So a lot of the Indonesian guys do make a whole cut style. Willie's just made a whole cut style for Brian Nichols recently. I have a couple pictures I can send you later. It's in the Arif & Sons antique red. He bought an Arif & Sons as well and sent it to Willie's in that antique red that I showed earlier. So Willie has developed a whole cut. Bristleback has their, I think it's called, not their Kai, it's like their Buck or something, which is a whole cut setup. A couple of them have whole cuts. The Danner style is the one with the D-ring laces where the one tongue slides into the other side of the tongue in the whole cut style. That's the Mountain Light. That's what the Cord Master looks a lot like. It's not like your traditional whole cut where it can be like a whole dress boot up to 8 inches. It's like that specific model, but it is a whole cut where the tongue tucks under to make the one seam that exists in the boot. But they do other styles besides that. The Cord Master is their known style, and also the fact that they can do it in anything from Indonesian local leather to Horween shell cordovan, which they do keep on hand.
Willie's Leathers is another one.
He's Filipino.
He's not taking anybody right now, is he? I think he kind of shut things down a little bit.
He has, and he's a little weird to deal with. So I've tried to order from him. So according to Brian, who actually has like a phone number with him and has like gotten measured in person and has visited his shop a couple times. One of the guys in his shop handles Instagram, and Willie only really deals with the WhatsApp stuff. I've tried to have conversations with them on Instagram, and I've kind of gotten the cold shoulder, and it's not gone very well, so I've just kind of said, you know what, I'm done with this. But apparently if you hit him on WhatsApp, you actually get Willie himself, and he's a lot more open. He's also super open to trying new things. Now, there has been some mistakes. So he paused on orders for a while because they were making mistakes. Like Art ordered a pair, and it like wasn't even close to the settings he ordered. But once again, just like the Indonesian guys, it's your boot now. And Art had to sell that one at a fairly big loss. But I think they've kind of redone their internal system to be a little bit better. Brian's stuff so far from the pictures I've seen looks exceedingly good. So maybe they've gotten past the kinks in that.
Pretty sure I remember that he decided that long waiting lists weren't good, and they had created like an artificial cap with himself where he wouldn't do waiting lists over a certain amount of time. So he would shut down ordering until he got back down below that lip, and then he'd open ordering back up. And that's one that I hadn't noticed anybody else doing, but I think I read recently he was kind of changing gears a little bit.
He's done that twice now, so he has done that. That is one thing that he has done. Is once he's got a certain number of orders and a certain amount of backlog, he'll stop taking new orders till they get caught up. So he has done that twice. But I mean, I can also understand it. That's common practice in the cowboy boot world. Most cowboy boot makers usually don't let their waiting list get longer than 3 years, and some keep it as short as like 6 months, where like they open X number of boot spots, and that's just it. And there's a couple reasons as to why. It's easy to get behind. They could die tomorrow. I mean, everyone's got a slightly different philosophy on that. Most of the Indonesian makers we've referenced, I think Underhood's the longest at 9 to 14 months. Most of these guys are quite a bit quicker. Now, Tahura was at the like 10-month mark. I think he's at the 2 to 4 month mark currently. Another brand that is a kind of a more website focused like Sagara is Junkard. Junkard, they've been around a little while, but their name recognition is newer, and they're known for doing lots of Shinky shell cordovan boots. And they also were one of the first to run Wicket and Craig leathers. Get Wicket and Craig leathers.
That's with a J, by the way. It's not really pronounced.
It.
Some of these maybe we should have spelled out a little bit.
Well,
or put some photos up. The one we just covered with the Sagara, that's not a C like cigar. That's actually S-A-G.
Yeah, S-A-G-R. S-A-G-A-R-A, cigar. Junkard is with a J. It looks like Junkard, but it's pronounced Junkard.
Junkyard without a Y.
Yeah, that pretty much it's pronounced Junkard. The Googling of these should be fairly easy to find. Underhood's got a very weird... I don't even know if I spelled it right in the list either. Underhood's got it's Underhood handmade. Some of these will come back pretty easy in a Google search. But Junkard's one that they do a lot of shell cordovan specialized, but they're a little bit more website focused, a little less Instagram, WhatsApp focused. We talked about Professor Barnett's, but a new up-and-comer that's been doing a lot of cool stuff. They brought in some cool leathers, and they've been doing a lot of collabs with people we actually know a little bit. One of them being the Happiness Carpenter is Fortis. Fortis is a newer brand. They're kind of up-and-coming. They've done stuff with Dale from Dale's Leatherworks. They actually ran 2 Happiness Carpenter collabs with John Bristow. They're doing a collab with Patina Miles right now in a Chelsea style. They really like their CF Steads, their Badalassi Carlos. They do a little bit of Shinky. They do some shell cordovan. They're a little newer, but they do some kind of cool articulate work, and they have a very unique stitching style when it comes to the backstay and the uppers, where they throw some flourishes in that they really like. And most of the work I've seen, and people have been quite impressed with it. Now, the stuff does look lower arch from everything I've seen. A little bit newer of a company. I will say, once you find an Indonesian maker that does what you want well and a last that you like, you'll probably stick with them. Because these guys lasts very wildly. Like, they're not close. Like, my Renavs all fit the same as my Tahuras, but the last itself feels quite different. The Benjamina last is literally modeled off a White's Cutter and has a very like 4811 55 feel to it. Whereas the Renav stuff is quite a bit different in feel. It reminds me a lot more of like dress boots. A little bit more dress boot in terms of feel, a little narrower waist, little wider forefoot area sometimes, depending on the last, a little bit narrower toe. Still boot last, but they feel a little dressier on foot. But he can customize them. Whereas like Bristleback, this one feels straight up like a Western boot, which is the reason I like it. It's the reason it's the one Bristleback that I wear. This it feels and looks straight up like it was modeled after a Packer or a cowboy boot. Whereas their newer ones look more like they're modeled off of like Red Wing style lasts. So.
It's a relationship thing, like we've touched on a few times. You want to create a relationship with them, and they do get to know you more as you go along, and what you wear, and as you decide more about what you need. And they're, by doing it by hand the way that they are, they can they can certainly do these different changes or different builds that you want rather than having to switch around to a different builder and be like, oh, I want one that looks like this, so I got to call this shop. No, just send it, go to the same shop and say, this is what I want this time. 9 times out of 10, they're going to say, no problem, we'll do it.
Yep. But that's the majority of what we have on this. I hope everyone found this helpful. I know this is a sketchier process. It is definitely not as, at least your first order. A lot of steps will not fill you with a lot of confidence. But if you were looking for something you can't find in America, or you're willing to take a shot on this, I would highly recommend it with at least one or two of these shops. My main recommendation would be Tahura or Renav. I like both of them quite a lot. The stuff they've made for me is impeccable. And at the price you're getting for it, it is a fantastic deal. But you are not getting made in America. You're only potentially maybe getting American-made leathers. And, understand that, your boots are going to be shipping from Indonesia, which means they might potentially go through China. For some people, that matters a lot. Boots have been seized in Chinese customs and had to be remade. Stuff does happen. The good news is like I said, I've received every pair I've ordered. I haven't had a problem. Your mileage may vary from that perspective, but I haven't heard of too many issues.
And they all go goods and services, as far as I know, and goods and services does protect the buyer. However, there's a time thing there. I haven't talked to PayPal to see what the time frame is on your protection, but there is some protection there. You could call them if you were concerned, but I don't know anybody who's gotten burned. As Mike said earlier, he doesn't know anybody who's gotten burned.
Just sandal them in the pigeon tree thing, and that was well publicized. That's the other thing too, is these guys care about the word of mouth because they do business exclusively off word of mouth. They're not paying for advertisements. So unhappy customers means less sales for them. So they're usually more than willing to go the extra mile. I mean, that's what their business is based off, is their word of mouth. Sizing is always going to be the first and foremost, pain point. Which, to be fair, we experience the same thing with new PNW customers all the time. People that are new to PNW boots usually struggle with sizing in the beginning. It's always the hardest point.
Especially the shops that have decided that they're not going to properly judge a proper fit sheet anymore. And then those customers just end up in a world of trouble trying to ask people what size that they need or how they need to adjust it from what they wear. And even the people who think they can answer that, they can't, because there's too many variables. The width and the length are certainly variables. The arch is variables. The arch shrinks up your foot. There are people who have wide feet that buy longer, to make up for it. And then there's other people that are, buying longer for different reasons. So there's really no way, as much as people on the internet think that they can help others, it's only helpful if that person has the same foot as them, and they don't know that. It's assumptions.
Yep.
So, these places are doing proper fit sheets. So you've actually got a better chance of getting a boot that fits than some of these builders that have decided that they're not going to do a proper fit sheet anymore.
Yep. And topping off of that, they're also not doing any try-on boots. I mean, I think now at this point, I'm not sure about JK, but I think it's just Bakers and Franks that'll do a try-on boot at this point. I mean, that's
a lot of them keep on heading in the wrong direction. And yep. I don't know, I guess God bless them if it works for them, but certainly not what's best for the customer.
Absolutely. And that's a good point. So when Renav made my first pair of boots, he was very hesitant with my measurements. He's like, "Man, this is a really wide foot. Can you send me a picture of boots you have?" So I actually flipped one of my pairs of Franks upside down and took a bunch of measurements with pictures on the centimeter side of the tape laying on it to help him out. So he's like, this is pretty wide. Like, are you sure your foot is actually this wide? I was like, yep, I'm double F. I'm quite sure my foot's that wide. So I mean, these guys are pretty good in terms of like being able to see the measurements and correlate them to size quite well. They know this stuff pretty well. So my only hesitation on any recommendation would be bristleback, and that's just because, especially with that Capek / Krang last, they've had a history of problematic fits.
And the Underhand.
Yep. And like I said, yeah, Underhood. I think that has a lot to do with the like getting through the lottery and then speeding through your stuff and not taking good measurements. Because once again, your measurements are only gonna make a good boot if you take good measurements. It's no different than the fit sheet. You screw up all the measurements on your fit sheet, and they're gonna send you a crappy try on too, right? It's the same boat. And I think a lot of people see like, oh, I just want to go for the finest, Indonesian made. I'll just go straight to Underhood and win a lottery, and it'll all be wham damn body slam. And obviously the reality there is that might not work out to be the case. So
it's kind of a FOMO situation.
Yep.
You're missing out.
Yep. You
gotta have it. Gotta collect them all.
Yeah, you see it a lot in clinch boots from Brass Tokyo. Clinch through Standard and Strange. Whenever they get a shipment in, they don't last long, and you see tons of people wearing clinch boots that the uppers are touching, or you could tell in the vamp area there's way too much space because there's like rolls that look like roller coasters on it. You see that a lot in the clinch community as well, and I think it's that same like rushing into it because, oh shit, they actually have boots available. I need to jump on this while I can. I really want my Gary Hole cut that bad. I point that model out because that is one of the models time and time again I see the uppers touching and crossing over and stuff on. So, but thank you everybody for watching.
We've reached the end again.
Yep.
Please hit that subscribe button. Please comment. We've been answering all the comments that people make, and the interaction has been fun and interesting. Suggestions for future videos, we'd love to hear.
Yep. Special on this one. I this one's one I feel like might generate quite a few comments and questions. So this is one I'm really interested in seeing kind of what the comments and feedback are on this one, because this one's quite a bit different than every other process we've talked about, and there's some nuances to this one. So I'm hoping maybe we get some good interaction on this one, or at least if not, we can help a couple people with questions get a good answer so that they get a good pair of boots out of Indonesia. Anyway,
all right.
Thanks everybody for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.
Ancha.